The winter wind carried more than cold that day. It carried whispers of an ancient promise, one that Myra had tried to forget for 3 long years. She sat in the deep snow beside the weathered fence post, her worn dress spreading around her like petals of faded hope. The fabric, once cream-colored and fine, now bore the stains of hardship and the patches of necessity. Behind her, half buried in the drifting white, lay her 3 children. Elena, barely 2 years old, whimpered softly in her makeshift blanket. The twins, Marcus and Marie, were for now old enough to understand hunger, but too young to understand why their mother's eyes held such deep sorrow. Their small faces, flushed red from the cold, peeked out from the threadbare coverings she had wrapped them in. The figure in the distance never moved closer, never moved away. He stood like a shadow against the winter landscape, his long coat, dark as midnight, his wide-brimmed hat, casting shadows that seemed too deep for the pale afternoon light. Myra knew he was waiting. He had been waiting for 3 years. Ever since that terrible night when she had made her bargain, 1 child for your husband's life. The stranger had whispered in the darkness of the hospital room. Choose wisely, for when the time comes, I will return for what is owed. Thomas had lived. The fever that should have taken him broke that very night, and he walked out of that place of death and despair on his own 2 feet. For 3 blessed years they had been a family. 3 years of laughter and growing children, of small joys and shared meals. 3 years of pretending the debt did not exist, but debts to such beings are never forgotten. The first cry came from Elena, a thin wailing sound that cut through the winter air like a blade. Myra's heart clenched as she gathered the child closer, feeling the terrible weight of the choice she had made. Elena's cry was the sound of innocence, pure and unaware of the darkness that surrounded them. The man in the distance tilted his head, as if listening to music only he could hear. Myra closed her eyes and remembered that night 3 years ago. Thomas burning with fever, the doctors shaking their heads, their hushed words of no hope and hours at most. She had been so young then, barely 20, with twin toddlers clinging to her skirts and Elena growing in her belly. The stranger had appeared in the hospital corridor like smoke given form. Choose, he had said, 1 life for another. Your husband lives, but when your 3rd child draws breath, the debt comes due. She had agreed without thinking, her heart breaking with the thought of losing Thomas, of raising 3 children alone in a world that showed no mercy to widows. She had thought herself clever, believing she could protect them all when the time came. But standing there in the snow, feeling the cold seep through her bones, she understood how naive she had been. The second cry came from Marcus. He was trying to be brave, her little man, but the cold was too much. His small voice joined his baby sister's, creating a harmony of fear and discomfort that made Myra's tears flow freely. They froze on her cheeks before they could fall. The stranger took 1 step forward. Just 1. But it felt like the distance between them had shortened by miles. Mama Marie whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. I'm scared. Myra reached for her daughter with trembling fingers, brushing snow from the child's dark hair. I know, sweetheart, I know. The 3rd cry, when it came, was not from any of the children. It came from Myra herself, a sound of pure anguish, a mother's grief released into the winter air like a prayer to an uncaring sky. In that cry was everything she could not say, her love for each of her children, her regret for the choice she had made, her desperate wish that she could bear this burden alone. But as her voice echoed across the snowy landscape, something extraordinary happened. The stranger stopped moving. He stood perfectly still for a long moment, his head tilted as if hearing something unexpected. Then, slowly, he began to turn away. Wait, Myra called out, her voice hoarse from crying. The debt. The figure paused but did not turn back. When he spoke, his voice carried on the wind, soft as falling snow but clear as crystal. The bargain was for 1 life, he said. But you have given me 3 cries instead. A mother's tears, freely given, are worth more than any single soul. Your children are precious to you. That makes them precious to me as well. The debt is paid. With those words, he melted into the winter landscape like shadow into shadow, leaving only the impression of darkness against the white. Myra sat in stunned silence for several heartbeats. Then Elena gurgled softly, and Marcus reached for her hand, and Marie asked if they could go home now. The children were cold and tired, but they were alive. They were hers. As she gathered them close, preparing for the long walk back to the small house where Thomas would be waiting with warm soup and worried questions. Myra understood what had truly happened. The stranger had not come to collect a debt, he had come to witness love. to see if her love for her children was strong enough to move forces beyond human understanding. Her tears had been the proof he needed. The snow continued to fall as they made their way home, but it felt different now, softer somehow. The children chattered and laughed, already forgetting their fear in the way that children do. But Mira remembered every moment, every word, every terrible and wonderful second of that afternoon. She had thought her fate was decided 3 years ago in a hospital corridor. But fate, she learned, was not a fixed thing. It could be changed by love, by sacrifice, by a mother's tears shed freely in the snow. When they reached the house, Thomas was indeed waiting. He swept them all into his arms, asking no questions about where they had been or why they looked so cold. He simply loved them, as he always had, as he always would. That night, as she tucked each child into their beds, Mira whispered a prayer of gratitude to the winter wind. She had learned that some debts could be paid in unexpected ways, and that love, true selfless love, had a power all its own. Outside, the snow continued to fall, peaceful and pure, covering the world in forgiveness.